Good evening, folks. I've spent most of my life in front of cameras playing characters who face down trouble with a steady hand and a clear eye. But tonight, I'm not here as a character. I'm here as Charles Bronson, a man who's lived 81 years on this earth, who's seen wars, watched empires rise and fall, and witnessed the slow erosion of values that once held this nation together like mortar between bricks. I'm standing before you today in 2002 to tell you something that most Christians, good, faithful, church-going people, have no earthly idea is coming. And it's coming fast. We've got maybe 20 years, maybe less, before something shifts in a way that's going to catch most believers completely off guard. Now, I'm not a preacher, never claimed to be. I'm not going to stand here and thump a Bible at you, though I respect those who do. But I've read that book, I've wrestled with it, and I've watched enough history unfold to recognize when the script is being flipped on people who think they know how the story goes. See, most Christians today are comfortable, and I don't mean that as an insult. I mean it as an observation. We live in a time of unprecedented ease, at least here in the West. You've got your mega churches with coffee bars, your worship songs that sound like pop music, your pastors preaching about your best life now. And there's nothing inherently wrong with any of that. But comfort has a way of making you soft. It makes you forget that faith was never meant to be comfortable. The early Christians, the ones who actually walked with Jesus, who heard his voice, who touched his scars, they didn't have comfort, they had conviction, they had persecution, they had a fire in their bones that made them willing to die rather than deny what they knew to be true. And most of them did die, horribly, publicly, without flinching. But somewhere along the way we traded that fire for climate control. Now I'm going to tell you what's coming in the next 2 decades and why most Christians are completely unprepared for it. But first, you need to understand how we got here. For decades now, generations really, Christians in America have operated under an illusion. The illusion of safety, the illusion of cultural dominance, the illusion that because we have religious freedom written into our Constitution, we'll always have it in practice. But history doesn't care about your Constitution. History cares about power, and who's willing to exercise it. You see, we've been coasting on the fumes of a Christian heritage that we didn't build and haven't maintained. Our grandparents and great-grandparents built churches, established moral codes, created institutions that reflected biblical values, and we inherited all of that. We walked into a house they built, sat down in their chairs, and assumed the house would stand forever just because we were living in it. But we stopped doing maintenance. We stopped teaching our children why these values mattered. We stopped defending truth when it became unpopular. We let the culture shift around us, degree by degree, compromise by compromise, thinking that if we just stayed quiet and kept to ourselves, we'd be left alone. That was a mistake. See, there's a reason Jesus told his followers they were sheep among wolves. There's a reason he said the world would hate them. There's a reason every apostle except one died a martyr's death. It wasn't because they were doing something wrong. It was because they were doing something right in a world that hated righteousness. And that world, it hasn't changed. It's just been sleeping, and now it's waking up. By the 2020s, within the next 20 years, there's going to be a convergence of events that will fundamentally alter the landscape for Christians in this country and around the world. I'm not talking about the rapture, though I know some of you are thinking that. I'm not talking about the second coming. I'm talking about something more immediate, more tangible, and more dangerous than most believers are prepared to face. There are legislative measures being pushed through right now, today in 2002 in the shadows, that will redefine religious freedom in ways that would have been unthinkable 20 years ago. There are technological systems being developed that will monitor speech, behavior, and belief in ways that George Orwell would have called prophetic. There are economic pressures being designed that will force believers to choose between their faith and their livelihood. And it's all happening faster than you think. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't deal in hysteria. But I do deal in facts. And the facts are these. In the next 2 decades, we're going to see the rollout of a digital identification system that will be mandatory for participation in the mainstream economy. You won't be able to buy, sell, conduct business, or access most services without it. And embedded within that system, buried in the terms of service that nobody reads, will be clauses that will flag and restrict anyone whose beliefs are deemed harmful or intolerant. Now, they won't call it religious persecution. They'll call it public safety. They'll call it protecting vulnerable communities. They'll wrap it in the language of compassion and tolerance. But make no mistake, what they're building is a cage. And it's specifically designed to lock out anyone who refuses to bend the knee to the new orthodoxy. But it is happening here. It's just been subtle, gradual, like a frog in a pot of water that's slowly brought to a boil. By the 2020s, the temperature is going to spike, and a lot of frogs are going to realize too late that they should have jumped out when they had the chance. What's coming is a test, not from God, He doesn't need to test us to know what's in our hearts, but a test in the sense that it will reveal what we're really made of. It will separate the wheat from the chaff. It will show who has genuine faith and who's just been playing church, because when your faith costs you nothing, it's worth nothing. I've played a lot of tough guys in my career, men who faced down outlaws and corruption and evil without backing down. Paul Kersey and Death Wish, the harmonica player in Once Upon a Time in the West. But those were just roles. The real heroes are the men and women who live their convictions every single day, regardless of the cost. And we're about to find out how many of those we have left. See, faith isn't just what you believe when things are easy. Faith is what you cling to when everything is taken from you. Faith is what you stand on when the ground beneath you gives way. Faith is what you're willing to die for. And in the next 20 years, that's exactly what some believers are going to face. The question of whether they're willing to lose their comfort, their security, their reputation, maybe even their freedom for the sake of remaining faithful to Christ. Most won't. I hate to say it, but it's true. Most will compromise. They'll rationalize. They'll say, well, it's just a little thing. It doesn't really matter. God understands. And step by step, they'll walk away from the truth until they're so far gone they don't even remember what they once believed. But some won't compromise. Some will stand firm. And those are the ones who are going to carry the torch through whatever darkness is coming. This isn't the first time the church has faced persecution. It's not even the 100th time. Throughout history, believers have been hunted, tortured, killed for their faith. And every single time, the church has not only survived, it's thrived. Because persecution purifies. It burns away the pretenders and the lukewarm and the people who are only in it for the social benefits. It leaves behind a core of believers who are absolutely sold out, completely committed, willing to stake everything on the truth of the gospel. That's what happened in the first 3 centuries of Christianity. That's what happened during the Reformation. That's what's happening right now in countries where being a Christian can get you imprisoned or executed. And that's what's about to happen here. The comfortable cultural Christianity that we've known in the West is coming to an end. It has to, because it was never real to begin with. Real Christianity has always been costly, always been dangerous, always required sacrifice. We've just been living in a brief, unusual moment in history where that wasn't the case, but that moment is over. So here's what I need you to understand. If you're hearing this message, the next 20 years are going to bring changes that you need to be spiritually and practically prepared for. You need to know what you believe and why you believe it. You need to have counted the cost. You need to have decided before the pressure comes that you will not compromise your faith no matter what they threaten to take from you, because they will threaten and they will take. They'll start with your money, your ability to earn a living, then your reputation, then your freedom. And if you still won't bend, they'll come for your family. That's how it always works. The pressure escalates until you break or until they break you. But here's the thing they don't understand. You can't break something that's already been crucified with Christ. You can't threaten someone who's already died to themselves. You can't take anything from someone who's already surrendered everything to God. That's the secret the martyrs knew. That's why they could sing hymns while being burned alive. They had already lost everything that mattered to this world, which meant the world had no leverage over them anymore. That's the place every Christian needs to get to in the next 20 years. Not physically dying, though some may face that, but spiritually dying to this world and its approval and its rewards. Because if you're still clinging to comfort, you're going to lose it. And when you do, you'll be tempted to blame God, to abandon your faith, to say it wasn't worth it. But if you've already let go, if you've already decided that Jesus is worth more than anything this world can offer, then when they take everything, you'll still have the only thing that truly matters. Now, I know this all sounds dark, and it is. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. We're heading into a dark time. But the darkness isn't the end of the story. It never has been, because light shines brightest in darkness, and the gospel has always spread fastest under persecution. When Christians are comfortable, they get lazy, they get complacent, they compromise. But when they're pressed, when they're tested, when they're forced to choose between Christ and everything else, that's when they become dangerous. That's when they become the church that Jesus said the gates of hell couldn't stand against. So yes, what's coming is going to be hard. It's going to separate the real believers from the pretenders. It's going to cost people everything. But it's also going to revive the church in ways we haven't seen in generations. Because when you can't rely on buildings or programs or cultural acceptance, you have to rely on God. When you can't hide behind respectability, you have to actually live what you believe. When the stakes are high, the shallow people leave, and what's left is pure. That's what's coming by the 2020s. Not the end of the church, but the end of the comfortable, compromised version of it that we've been tolerating. And honestly, it's about time. So what do you do with this information? First, you pray. You get on your knees, and you ask God to prepare your heart for what's coming. You ask Him for the courage to stand firm. You ask Him to reveal any areas where you've compromised, where you've let the world shape you instead of being shaped by His Word. Second, you study. You get into Scripture like your life depends on it, because it does. You need to know what you believe so well that you can stand on it when everything else is shaking. You need to have God's truth so deeply rooted in you that no amount of pressure can dislodge it. Third, you connect. You find other believers who are serious about their faith. You build relationships that can sustain you when isolation comes. Because they will try to isolate you, they'll make it socially costly to be a Christian, professionally costly, personally costly. You need a community of believers who will stand with you when everyone else walks away. Fourth, you prepare. Practically speaking, you need to get your affairs in order. You need to reduce your dependence on systems that can be used to control you. You need to build resilience in your life so that when the pressure comes, you have some capacity to endure it. But most importantly, you decide right now, today, before the pressure comes, you make the decision that you will not deny Christ no matter what. You settle it in your heart that He is worth more than your comfort, your career, your reputation, even your life. Because that's the decision every Christian is going to have to make in the next 20 years. And if you wait until you're facing the choice to make the decision, you've already lost. I've been around a long time, I've seen a lot, and I've learned that the most dangerous thing you can do is assume that tomorrow will be like today. History doesn't move in straight lines, it moves in cycles, and we're at the end of one cycle and the beginning of another. The cycle of comfortable Christianity in the West is ending. The cycle of persecution and purification is beginning. Most Christians have no idea. They think life will just continue as normal. They think they can keep playing it safe, keep compromising, keep blending in. But in the next 20 years, everything changes. And when it does, you're going to have to choose. You can't serve two masters. You can't love God and love the world. You can't follow Christ and follow the crowd. The time for fence sitting is over. So I'm asking you right now, where do you stand? When the cost of following Jesus goes from theoretical to actual, will you pay it? When they tell you to deny Him or lose everything, what will you choose? Because that choice is coming. It's coming faster than you think, and by the 2020s, you're going to have to make it. I pray you choose wisely. I pray you choose courageously. I pray you choose Christ, because at the end of the day, at the end of history, that's the only choice that matters. I'm Charles Bronson, and what I've told you tonight, I've seen it coming for years. I won't be here to see it all unfold, but you will. And when it happens, when everything I've warned you about comes to pass, remember this moment. Remember that you were warned. Remember that you had time to prepare. And remember that no matter how dark it gets, the light has already won.